Hey there, friends. Welcome to Being Brown and Bold podcast. I am your host, Jess Thomas. We are excited about stepping out of our comfort zone, taking chances, and listening to our guests who have done amazing things with their life. Today, I'm chatting with Catherine Dayal. She is a social media influencer, digital content creator, and columnist based out of Mumbai and the US. After moving to India in 2016, what started out as a platform to share her migration from New Jersey to Mumbai has since garnered appreciation and love from around the world, including me. Her page centers around genuine and relatable videos showcasing food, style, lifestyle, and the everyday South Asian experience. This unique take on life on the other side of the pond has recently garnered her a four-part column in Harper's Bazaar, India, called #Girl on the Move, discussing her experience and life in India as an expat. When not making content or writing, you can find her perusing the aisles of fashion expos, eating delicious chaat, or attempting to work on her grammatically incorrect Hindi. So, Catherine, it is so great to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, to get started at Triple B, we think names and pronunciations of our names are important. So how do we say your name properly?
So my official name is still my pre-marriage name. So it's Catherine Thangam Phillip. And then my married name, which I use also for work, is Catherine Dayal.
Excellent. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe your cultural heritage, how that informs your life and your work? Basically, tell us about yourself. What does it mean to be you?
So I am a American Indian Malayali from New Jersey, and I grew up there. And what it means to be me is, I live in two countries, so global, bicontinental, learning and I think I want to say multicultural, because America is full of different cultures, and also India, also living in Mumbai of all places, is very multicultural. You have so many nuances from different culture that makes one big city. So it's just, I find myself to be very much exposed to everything.
And is this something that your life today, is it something that you expected when you were little? Like when you were little, what did you imagine your life would be as an adult? Did you ever imagine anything like this?
Well, I am Indian, so I managed myself to be married, of course. And, that was always like pounded into my mind. But no, I honestly I won't say that I ever thought that I would be coming to India. Funny enough, I think last week I came across a video from 2013 that said like, where would you like to live? And I, in the video, was like, I want to live in Mumbai, and I said that. And I found it so I found that so hilarious, that I kind of manifested that for myself. But I think growing up, I was never someone who lived more than like 45 minutes from my house. So I was always like, even though I lived in New Jersey, I went to school in New York City. I lived there for 10 years, and I was always close to home. So I never thought I would be so far away and so um, um, like distant from everybody.
Tell us more about this journey to India, living in the subcontinent and family life. And yeah, why are you there?
So I want to say, I think when we were younger, we used to visit Kerala often. My family's from Kerala, so we used to visit there very often. And as a young girl, frankly speaking, I found it quite boring. And I felt like, you used to, beyond visiting my grandparents, which brought me so much joy, I didn't really have that, like, I just felt like Kerala, there was not much to do. And I think if you visit Kerala, especially as a Malayali, like, there's like it's a very similar experience for everybody. Like, doors are, like you're in your house by 7 p.m. You're doing your prayers by 9. You're in bed by 9:30. You're up at 6. So it never really felt like a vacation. It just felt like, you're just kind of living this life. And it's just like the whole month you're just visiting house after house after house, and you're not really experiencing the state and what it has to offer. And I think when I used to hear stories about Mumbai, it used to be all these fun stories about food and exciting adventures. And I think that kind of got in my head that Mumbai is this exciting place that I want to go. So I was able to, when I met my husband in 2014, I had to really make that decision for myself. Like, do I want to go? And I came to visit in between, for like, just for a quick, like 2-week vacation. And I did like it. So that's what ended up making my decision from moving there to here.
Did your husband already live in Mumbai?
Yeah, he was living and working out of Mumbai. So the thing is, because of his background in the industry, in the Bollywood industry, it was very difficult for him to move to the US. So if we wanted to be together, I would at least have to come to Mumbai to make that happen.
So I'm guessing you did like long distance dating, right? For a while.
Yes, we did. Yeah, we did it for 2 years. So we met in 2014. We pretty much got engaged in the end of 2015 and then married in June of 2016.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did long distance dating too for 1.5 years. And then we were in the same state for like 4 months. But we were engaged by that point. So yeah, I know that's like difficult, but you had probably more time zones where it was more difficult to like do phone calls because I was in New York and he was in Illinois, which is only like one time zone away.
Yeah, it was very difficult, but I was very lucky in the fact that at the time when we were dating, I was trying to do my work as being like actress and modeling. So
Hmm.
during the day, I had a lot of free time, and then evening, I had a, like, your typical actor restaurant shift. So I was working in a restaurant in the evening. So, our timings kind of worked out that way, where mornings I could spend time and speak to him, and I was not doing that much except going to a few auditions. And then evening by the time I got back, he would wake up. So we speak for a few hours. Somehow that was the easiest thing. I remember being like, it was very effortless, despite the time. It was very effortless.
Yeah. I did not know about the restaurant part. Is that how like you developed your foodie sense, or were you like, I want to work in a restaurant because I'm a foodie?
No, it was more like I have to pay my rent. So this was like I get into it.
Yeah.
I to be very honest, regarding food, I was never that interested in food growing up. It was not something that I was like. I was more like, some people are like, some people are, they live to eat, and some people like eat to live. So it's more like I was just eating to live. I was just to sustain myself. Um, and even though I lived in New York for so many years, I was living as like a young 20-year-old. So I really didn't have those kind of budgets to go spend on expensive restaurants. You're going to get fast food and like quick eats or whatever your budget allows. So when I met my husband is actually when I started getting a better development for food, because he was very global. He was traveling the world. He understood what food flavors were. And because of him, I got to go to different restaurants and try different things. And that is where my like love for food and just the cuisine stem from.
Um, I also developed, actually, my dad was a foodie, but I didn't know that was like he liked good food and he was adventurous. He came to America, but he was the one that's like, oh, somebody told me about this garlic angel hair pasta. Let's try and make it. And I was like, what is happening here? So I think I got it from him, but it wasn't but we ate Kerala food every day, like at
Yeah.
least twice a day. So it wasn't until I left home and went to college, I'm like, what is all this food? Like I've never soup and salad and a main course. And yeah, that kind of blew my
Yeah.
mind.
My mom was very global that way. I mean, like growing up, she tried to like incorporate as many dishes. I mean, because also we were young kids, we didn't want to eat Kerala food every day. So like she would incorporate like meatballs, but make it like meatball curry with rice. So it's like familiar things. And that was the kind of, and even now, I think she makes Indian food very less. She's now really into Korean, Vietnamese, what is like she makes a lot of Asian food, and that's what she's really into now. So I'm very lucky that my mom is such a food person. She loves cooking, she loves trying new recipes, she's constantly sending me recipes, and so I'm very lucky that way, that she's like loves to try different things.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's awesome. We didn't talk about it before. So did you meet your husband because of your like being in the industry as well with acting, modeling and all that?
Well, I mean, in addition to acting and modeling, I was dancing. I'm like Indian. I'm an Indian classically trained dancer. I've been since
Ah, okay.
12, and I when I finished my Arangetram at 18, I kind of thought like, where do I want to go with this? And then I got the opportunity to do more like fusion dance, and I got picked up to start doing performances all over the city, and which for me was a great side hustle at the time. I was making good money that way, and through my dance community, I had met somebody who knew my husband because they worked together a few years prior. And so they introduced us. And that's how we started speaking and getting to know each other.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, because it's not common to meet somebody from another country and like
Yeah.
start dating. So I was wondering, like, oh, how did that even happen? So that's so cool.
It was
Um,
very unexpected.
yeah. Aw. Um, do you miss the Northeast of America?
Oh my gosh, so much. I
Yeah.
definitely miss the US a lot. I mean, when you're in your 20s and you make life decisions, I don't think you really particularly think about, what that really means, because at the time you're like, I want this crazy adventure, so I'm going to go do it. And now, it's been about 7 years this year since I've left, and watching your parents get older, it's very difficult to see that. And my siblings are not very close, so I think even growing up my parents thought like, oh, Kathy is always going to be close, so we have her nearby, and I was the one who moved the furthest away, which they also weren't expecting. So I mean, definitely missing my parents, missing my nephews, watching them grow up, not being able to be close to that, because I was always a family person growing up. So that I think is to me the most difficult part of being away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you get to come back often to visit?
I do. I mean, I definitely try to come back twice a year, which is a lot. And I try to come back for like maybe 1 to 2 months, not every visit, but like I try to, it's like collectively like 3 months of the year, I feel like I'm over there. Because of pandemic, 2020, I was there for like almost 6 months. And then 2021, I was there for about 4 months. So I was there for a while. And which was good and bad, because especially in 2020, when I went back for 6 months, we didn't know it was going to be for that long. It's just the way that the pandemic was at the time. And then I think I got too used to getting back into American life, and then coming back here was a very difficult for me. Like again, I felt like I like just came to India, and having to like get used to things again. That was a bit of like a little difficult for me to do that, to adjust.
Yeah. I would think like one of the harder things is to connect with people, like making friends. Like my kids move to different cities, and that's what they talk about. Like, how do you, and I think Bumble even has like a BFF mode where instead of finding a person to date, you can find friends. Did you find any experiences like that when you moved to Mumbai?
Um, so I was very lucky in the fact that my friends that I had in New York ended up moving to Mumbai around the same time. So my mom would always say, like, there's no difference talking to Kathy. If I'm calling her in New York, it'd be like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm hanging out with so and so. And hey, call her in Mumbai. What are you doing? Oh, I'm hanging out with so and so. It's the same people. And she's like, there's no difference. But the good and bad with that is like I was very lucky to have friends here. But the bad part is, because I made a lot of friends who were expats living in India, most of the time they would all go back to the US or go back to the country they were from. So I feel like it does hurt, because you're start to build these relationships with people, and then when they leave, you're like, oh man, I have to start all over again. Which I think that is very difficult about being an expat in another country, versus like being from a place that you normally are from and you grew up with having all these friends. I ended up I ended up meeting some of my friends through exhibitions, just putting myself out there, connecting with them, and like working on building those relations. One of the great things I will say about India, or Mumbai at least, there's no like scheduling to meeting with friends. I think I noticed that in the US when I go back, it's like there's a schedule, and share your Google Calendar. Like in Mumbai, it's more like, hey, are you free tonight? Let's go do something. And that's kind of how the life of Mumbai is. It's like how you think your day is going to be. It's never how it's ended. So that just that does open a lot of doors to meet a lot of people that way, which I think in the US it is a much more difficult situation to make new friends in a new place.
Wow. Yeah, that takes a lot of boldness, I feel, to like really put yourself out there.
Mhm.
Um, so I read your articles in Harper's Bazaar, India, and one of the things that struck me is how you started taking public transportation to like get a feel. So tell me how it feels taking like a subway in New York City versus in Mumbai.
So actually the metro in Mumbai is really clean. It's very clean because I think it's just a much more newer transportation system than it is in New York. Also, it's at a height, so there's no really way of like when you go to New York, it's like there's just mice and stuff everywhere, and like and you don't really come across that much in Mumbai because it's all at a height. They're all above the city. It's much cleaner. I will say like they're very particular about women's safety in the sense that there's always the first compartment is women's only. It's an only women's only
Ah,
compartment. So
nice.
you do feel quite safe. And then there's a barricade, and then the men's compartment starts. And then after that, there's a mixed compartment if you're comfortable with that. So that does make me feel safe because I mean in New York, um I never had a issue of safety at that time, and we're talking now like 10 years ago. So I never had an issue with safety living in New York. I know that has become a very huge issue now. But the good thing about Mumbai is that, the metro is on its way to be building, and they're like building an entire new system of transportation here. But what's available to us, I will say, like, I feel quite good about um getting there, like taking a women's compartment and feeling safe about reaching my destination safely. um Also, what's really cool is like I think in the US we have metro cars in the US, and the cool thing about India, it's like a coin. So like you you do your coin thing, and then when you're done with your trip, there's a box where you can just drop your coin.
Ooh,
So it's all reusable. It's not like
yeah,
paper or being thrown away. It's very cool that way.
yeah, that's really neat.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's been a while. I live in the hills of Tennessee, and there's no public transportation here, which is bad for the people here because then it's hard for them to get around. So I have not been on a subway in like forever, and I miss subway surfing. I used to commute
Yeah.
from Long Island to Manhattan to go to work, and like you just all have this rhythm of what with the vehicle with the train. So I like kind of miss that.
Yeah.
um,
There's a sense of like accomplishment when you take the subway and the metro. Like there's like a
yeah,
sense I got there and like I made it on time, or I made it better than yesterday's time. And there's that sense of accomplishment you have with metros. Yeah.
tell me, changing subject a little, do you have a memory of changing from being unadventurous or like my regular, normal, what everybody does, to being bold? If so, tell us about that and like what inspired you.
Well, I will say, like, I was always quite bold when I was younger. I never grew up thinking, oh, what do other people think? I was quite opposite. And I remember like, even for a small examples at the time, like Abercrombie or Hollister shirts were everywhere. And like, it was like, you were only cool if you wore that. And I remember very particularly being like, I'm not going to wear that. And I used to try to find better clothes, better options for myself. And I remember like I was never really scared. I was never shy. I was pretty outgoing. I was never afraid to talk to someone, and I think that went up until my 20s. And I think I will say I did lose some of that coming to India, because even though it was such a it was like such a juxtaposition, because it's like taking such a huge bold step to move to India, but then the environment and dealing with all these new um exposure, I think, made me feel very small, because I thought that I would have to like relearn not just a few things, so many things. I had to change my entire mindset. So, one of the things this year and especially last year and this year, is working on getting my boldness back. And I think, living in Mumbai, I think I didn't realize how much I was letting it get picked away. Small things like I was never afraid to go up to someone and introduce myself. That was something I had to do regularly in New York, being in the acting and modeling field, or going to these like networking events. But in India, I think I just found everything overwhelming. I stopped going. And I think I lost my confidence a little bit to go up to someone and be like, hi, my name is Catherine. And
Hmm.
working on that is, I think, helping me build that boldness back more than ever, which I'm hoping for.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So when you're there, like generally living in Mumbai, what has been intimidating or scary for you, or like what are some difficulties that you've faced being there?
Definitely language. I mean, I grew up in a Malayali home, and even my Malayalam is really not good.
Oh, mine's terrible. Like,
And there's this like dish in Kerala cuisine, merikutti, and my dad's like, it's just such a hard name to pronounce, and my dad's always like, when you say it, it just sounds like Mary Kuti, like you're not even
like a
saying it.
woman's name, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then my I didn't grow up speaking Malayalam that much, because even my grandmother spoke English to us, so it wasn't like, it was not something we were like pushed to learn. So my tongue doesn't roll that way. So I already had difficulty with Malayalam, and then coming here, it's like I had to learn Hindi from scratch too.
Wow.
And yeah, and I'm also just like, I'm just someone who doesn't do well with languages. I just, beyond English, it's like I have a lot of difficulty picking up languages. It's one of these like things that I have. um so language was one. The worth ethic is just a little bit different here, like work mentality is very different here. um it can be very frustrating, meaning like, no one really is on time if you're trying to get things done in your day. I think in the US, it's like when you call somebody, like they say, oh, we'll be there at 9 o'clock, 8:45, they're there. Whereas in India, where you call someone and you're like, okay, 9 o'clock, and they show up around 11:30, 12. So it's very hard to kind of plan your day that way. And the overall, I think, mentality is a little bit different here. I think US were very like outspoken and loud. And I think in India, it's kind of like this like chalta hai attitude, which can be very frustrating sometimes. Also, I think in the US, we are just a lot more independent. We like take ourselves around. We have to cook our own food. There's no one here to help us. Whereas in India, it is a great luxury to have, like to be able to say, oh, I have a driver or I have a maid to help me. It does, you are depending on these people to make sure your day goes smooth as well. So that was a huge shift for me, because I remember like, they're like waiting to be told, what to make or what to do, and I have nothing, like I have nothing to tell them. I'm like, I don't know, what do you
Yeah.
feel like making? Yeah, I remember that for the longest time it was like, what should I make? And I'm like, I don't know, what do you feel like making? Because it was like, when you want to make something, you just go and make it yourself, or you get the ingredients. So these are the few things I think are a struggle for me. And obviously, like, like I mentioned before, it's being away from home and having that homesickness. But I mean, and Mumbai it's just a lot of traffic, and it's gotten worse after pandemic. Um,
Mm,
so that is like, again, those are the few things, which I mean, I live in a very suburban place in New Jersey. So like these are like, I can easily get 5 errands done in an hour, or six, I mean, five is a lot, maybe like 3 or 4 max. Whereas in India, it's like I'm lucky to get one thing done in an hour time. So
mm-hmm.
that it's like, there's good and bad to it. I won't say one is better than the other.
It's just learning a completely different
Right.
system and
Yeah.
yeah, lifestyle. Yeah, that's a lot to learn. As you're doing this new, like, how long have you been in India now?
So it'll be 7 years this year.
Not including pandemic, American, like
Yeah, I will say
business
then, like, I
history.
won't include pandemic, because pandemic
Yeah,
time I was really in the US a lot. So I would say about 5 years.
yeah.
Yeah.
So now that you've been there for a while, you've like done like amazing things, you've made your life there. As you've done all that, like what's informed your outlook? Like, do you have any belief system or faith that like helped you in motivating you?
So we are Christians, and I mean, we grew up in a very strong Christian faith. My parents are quite religious, and meaning like, every Sunday was church. In the morning of church was Sunday school, and then you had your Sunday school competitions, which I somehow managed to get away not doing every year. Um, and then, and you kind of grew up in this idea of like church family, and school family. And so I'm very lucky that, I'm Martha. My family's, we're all from a
Oh,
Marthamite.
me too.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
originally.
oh, okay. So yeah, so we're from the Marthamite background. So I mean, there are things that irk me when I look at it as a whole, but I think overall, I don't like to look at that because um for me, like faith is become a pretty important part of my day. I won't say that I'm as religious as my parents where I pray every day. I that is something that was actually on my vision board this year to
Mm.
start becoming like that. Um and build in that faith a little bit stronger in me. But having like spiritual belief is what helps guide me, I think, telling myself I mean, sometimes it is a form of like affirmations or manifestations, saying like it's going to be okay, God is there to guide me. Having these little vocal notes to your mental notes to yourself really do, I think, help me. And like we've had conversations, my parents and I, about moving to India, where it's like, well, I think this was God's plan in the making, because why else would I be able to come here? How else would I have met this person and come all over here? So I mean, we have talked about it a few times. There are times that I'm thinking, oh God, why? But um but otherwise, I will say, like, it's been such an interesting journey. And I think like having my faith really helped informed. I remember very particularly also when I met my husband, I was at a really low point in my life. I was very upset over a prior relationship, and I was like really at the bottom of a pit. And it was Lent. And I'm pretty particular about Lent. I do it every year. Like it's one of the main things I do. And that year at Lent, I said, well, I'm going to take this very, very seriously. And I gave up so many things. I had given up potato chips. I had given up junk food. I had given up sweets, meat. Like I had given up so many things. And my major thing was wake up every day, read the Bible, pray, and do journaling. And I did those very religiously in 40 days. And I remember like that was the time that I got introduced to my husband. And for me, like that was a sign that like, hey, wow, I'm really committed myself to God, and I got this answer because I really was looking for a married a partner at that time. So I think after that, I've really always turned to faith when I am struggling for
Mhm.
many things.
Yeah. And for people who are listening who don't know what Lent is, it's the 40 days before Easter, where Christians will take time to like reflect and think about their life, and the giving up of something is not to be on a diet, or like it's meant to like take something away that's pleasurable. And
Mhm.
like I gave up potato chips almost all the time. Um, that instead, like focusing our mind on something that's going to grow us spiritually.
Mhm.
So it's in the liturgical calendar for Christians, it is like a time of like quiet. It's kind of like almost the opposite of Advent in the Christmas time, where you're spending that time like anticipating, like hope is coming, there's light coming. And Lent is a time hey, like big things are happening in the world. Um, and for the original story of Jesus, like that was the time right before he was going to be uh, crucified. So it's a time of like reflection, I would say, really. So it's not as opposed to celebration, but then that's why Easter is like a big party, because it's like, hey, like we know where our hope is, and we have a faith that sustains us and grows us. So yeah, I love that you grew up with that too.
Thank you.
Um, okay, going back to Mumbai and culinary world. So I've only spent a few days in Mumbai. I have a friend that lives there, and he and his wife were like, we need to take you to all these foodie places. And so I had never had chaat before until that trip. They had this, I don't know the name of this restaurant, but it was this
Elko?
amazing, it's a, no, changing foods. It was a
Uh-huh.
seafood restaurant, and they're famous for their salt
Yeah.
and pepper crab.
Probably
And
Bastion, yeah. Was it
this was like
Bastion?
22 years ago, 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Yeah,
Oh, then
long
I
time ago.
wouldn't.
I don't know, remember. This is before the World Wide Web really.
Okay.
um, but I remember our friends just talking about like the culinary scene in Mumbai. So for you, what's the culinary scene like? Especially when it comes to like coffee shops and tea houses, like chai shops, and as well as like international cuisine.
It's so global here. It's so global. I don't think you think about, oh, India being a global spot for international cuisine, but it just really is. Like, when you talk about coffee shops, when you said coffee shop, I had 5 names in my mind already that like, and they're all within like a mile distance of me. So
Wow.
there's like literally a new coffee shop coming up every week. There's a new restaurant coming up every week. And the great thing about, places like Mumbai and Delhi is because the restaurateurs do have like more of a budget to work with, they end up bringing in a lot of chefs from like Spain, Italy, US to like start their restaurants here and then
Wow.
continue it on. I mean, I just went to a restaurant called La Loca Maria 2 weeks ago, and it was started by this guy from Spain. He came over, and you're getting like amazing ceviche, amazing like tapas, good quality ingredients, and they're what they're doing is really changing that scene, because for India being such a um agricultural country, I feel like that's one of the things that restaurants do lack here is using like seasonal cuisine. And I think a lot of these chefs from abroad are coming in teaching like, no, this is the way to do it. And that's not to say you have amazing restaurants like O Pedro, which is a go-in restaurant, amazing food, Bombay Canteen, which they really do focus on seasonal current cuisine, and then something like Mask, which is a high-end luxury fine dining experience. I believe I'm yet to go, but it's on my list. It's like forever wait. And like the meal is like 3 or 4 hours. So it's like a long dinner, which all this beautiful seasonal food that you get there.
That sounds amazing. Like, I feel like I would come, I'd spend like 2 weeks there and be like, I haven't even like scratched the surface.
Yeah, there's some amazing food. I mean, like even Indian food, like you just can't beat it. Like I eat out Indian food outside India too, and it's just like you just can't beat it. There is some like, especially Kerala food. I will say, yes, Kerala food is outside. Like when you go to Kerala home, it's good, but it's just so different when you eat it in Kerala. Like because the oil is fresh, the produce is fresh, the masalas are fresh, so it just makes it to be an altogether like really fragrant meal, which I just don't think I find much outside of Kerala,
Yeah.
as that level of good food.
Yeah. Okay, I'm getting hungry. Okay, this question I asked our guests, what is something that is stereotypical of your culture or background that is actually true? But for you, it could be like, what do Indians think about Americans? Or what do Marathis think about Malayalis? Or like, there's so many ways you can answer this question. So answer it whatever way you want.
What's stereotypical about Indians? I would say what's stereotypical about Malayalis, but it is probably true, is that most Malayalis live in the Middle East. I would say that. They all have some story related to Middle East, which is probably true. Yeah.
Right. How would you encourage a listener who is unfamiliar with your background as Catherine to understand your world better? Because I feel the reason I'm asking this is I feel like there's been so much unkindness in the past few years that we've seen very much on social media. And I think a lot of it is people don't know each other and they don't know how to be kind to each other and love each other because they don't actually see them as people, but like, I don't know, like a presence instead. So yeah, how would you encourage somebody who's unfamiliar to understand your world better?
I would say, let me think about that. I mean, if I want to look at Catherine, for me too, it's like my background is so different. Like I grew up in the US and now I'm in India. So I think it's just listen. I think it's just to be kind and to listen and not make preconceived notions, I want to say. Like, I think that's something that's so important, because I will say that growing up in the US, I had a lot of preconceived notions about many things. And then when I came here, it did really humble me a lot to be like, oh, wait, everyone has a story, everyone has a background. And instead of just judging people, let's take the time to listen to them, listen to their story, because many of them have very interesting stories. And I would just say that, is to be kind, I would say, is like, how you can get to know me better is to be kind and listen, uh,
Mhm.
and remove the preconceived notions that I think is so evidently there also on social media.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Knowing what you know now, what
Mhm.
would you, if you can go back in time, what would you say to 18-year-old Catherine?
Ooh, I would say go buy some Apple stocks. Yes.
Definitely.
You go buy
Raise
some
some
Apple.
Bitcoin when it first came out.
Yeah. You know, forget about forget about all these other things, go invest in Apple stock. Also, I will say, no, I will tell her to know your worth. There are so many people that are going to bring you down over the course in your early 20s, and I think knowing your worth and knowing that you're deserving of so many things, is to believe in that first.
That's really good. Yeah, because I think that's true of a lot of young people, men and women, I've noticed too, is that they don't realize that they are worth respect and loyalty. And yeah,
And to
I
be
totally.
paid.
And what?
And to be paid.
Oh, and to be paid what they're worth. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And to even
Last.
with relationships, and to
Mm,
find proper love relationships that people treat you well.
mm, yeah. I wonder if people just don't, young people especially, don't know what it means to be treated well, or because of this lack of feeling worth or value, like I'll just take, oh, somebody likes me, and so like that's enough, which.
I won't, I'm not blaming the Indian background, but I've had this conversation with a few people. I do think it's a lot of the way that we're brought up, because we're always brought up to be like, just get married and have children, get married and children. That's how we're taught. But no one is telling you, well, in your marriage, you should be treated this way, or in your relationships, you should be looking out for this. It's something like, well, you should have known that. I brought you up to be confident, but you didn't really brought me up like to know what to expect from relationships. So a lot of, I feel like, especially Indian people, kind of go into relationships very blindly, because they're so excited. I mean, I'm talking about people from, like, like my age group, like our age group, I guess. And to say, like, I don't know how it is for the young kids, but we were always like, dating was not allowed. So then you have to do it secretly. Then you're feeling like, oh, dating is a bad thing. So and then you're like, well, I don't know what I want out of a relationship, but this is what I have right now, so I'm going to just hold on to it. So I think you're kind of like, you have all these things going on in your mind that you really don't particularly understand, like, what is it to be respected in a relationship, to be revered, to be loved. And I think that's why I think Indian girls do have a hard time relationships more than others, because it's like not something we're brought up to be said, well, you have to be treated this way. I mean, I hear so many stories now with fathers taking their daughters out for dinner to teach them, or mothers teaching their sons. But that was not there when we were younger. We just kind of had to, like, and what we saw was what we saw in movies, in Bollywood movies, in American movies. And that was not a really great, preset for us to
Mhm,
understand what a proper relationship entails.
and that it takes work and investment in each other. But then also, like, going into it, also, one of the things I tell young people is, hey, when everybody has gone through hard things in their life, I don't know anybody that hasn't had some sort of family like issues or whatever. Like, please go to counseling before you get married. Individual counseling, not premarital, individual, because like you're going to have to work on that stuff at some point. So if you can get ahead a little bit, at least before you're married, that's going to help like the both
Mhm.
of you.
Mhm.
So, and then if like you're dating somebody and they're like, no, I don't need it, that's a red flag. Like, that's unteachability or
Yeah.
unwillingness to listen to you. And you should like be careful about, because if they're like that and you're at the dating stage,
Yeah.
get married. It's good.
Because when you get married, all these things, when these questions do come up, it's much harder to deal with them.
Yeah.
So I will say, like, it's so important to have these conversations early. And I think young girls are doing that nowadays, but just unfortunately for many of us, like, we didn't have those conversations growing up. So we had to learn the hard way.
And I'm so glad that therapy, counseling, all that is being more normalized now than ever.
Yeah.
Even in the South Asian community, like even my dad got his master's in counseling because he's like, oh, my dad's generation, which like he's 80 now, like our people, this age group, they need that too. And so I'm glad that there's a shift now in mindset.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, my dad's a little progressive. Okay. For me, I've always felt the mark of an Indian home is owning a curry plant. Do you have a curry plant in your home?
I do. It's very small because it's not growing that much, but it's very small. I think I have to change it to a bigger pot or something. But I use it's like it's all like baby leaves, frankly. It's not like big, huge.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have one, and it has made my life so much easier because in India, it's like when you want to go get curry leaves, it's like they give you like a huge batch, and I'm maybe only cooking one Indian meal a week or something. So it
Mm-hmm.
becomes a huge waste for me. So like this having my curry plant really made it so much better. I can just take a couple of leaves off.
Yeah.
It's like fresh. It tastes amazing.
Yeah. There is something like, even if you buy it fresh from the store, when you just take it off the plant, it is different. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. Chai, tea, coffee, or another beverage. What is your beverage of choice?
Chai.
Chai.
Yeah.
Do you make chaya with like no spice, or do you make like North Indian chai? What's your chai like?
Oh, so I recently changed my chai recipe and I think it's quite good. So to a pot of hot water, I add ginger, I add cardamom, I add like a little bit of black pepper. I let that
Mm,
boil. Then I add in my tea leaves and I let that boil for maybe like 1 to 2 minutes. I don't really let it boil over that because sometimes the leaves tend to get bitter.
mhm.
And I add my milk, and then with a ladle, I wait till it starts to boil and like start to aerate a bit to make it a little creamy. And then I recently heard about a trick about putting this instead of putting your sugar in the chai, putting it in a strainer and then pouring your chai over it
Ah,
in a cup. So I started doing that, and I will say, like, it helps distribute the sugar a lot more evenly into your
mm,
chai. So
mhm.
I started doing that, and I will say, like, it's definitely changed the way that my chai, like, I love having my chai in the morning. Like,
Yeah.
it's so, yeah.
That's cool. I never thought of that because I do chai parties. I just did a chai catering gig last week, and there's some
Uh-huh.
people who don't want sugar, but if I do it that way, then I can still give sugar to
Yeah.
those who want it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Ah, I'm gonna have to try that now.
Yeah, I learned it on Instagram through
Yeah,
through this other blogger, and I was like, that's an interesting technique.
yeah.
And I tried it and I was like, wow, this actually is really good because it did, especially in India, the sugar is like it's a little bit bigger. So it does take some time sometimes when you're stirring into the chai, whereas when you put it from the top, it just somehow just distributes a lot more evenly. And like you
Hmm.
said, like, you can really control the sugar then also,
Right,
you know.
right. Normally I cook the sugar in with the milk, but I
Mhm.
feel like that technique for when I have people of different, because all of like my parents' generation, everybody's diabetic now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they don't want sugar anymore. So, but I do. So yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Um, because the podcast is called Being Brown and Bold, is there something you'd like listeners to know if they are hesitant about making a bold move?
I would say start small. I think when we look at a bold move, we're looking at it as an overall like giant jump. And instead of taking it into small strides, I would say, like, if you're looking for a bold move, I would say start small, like do small steps first. And I think that's easier to digest than just making one huge change. For example, if you want to move to another place, like, instead of just jumping and moving in, taking that time to visit that place, get accustomed to the area, see if you like it, see if that's something for you, give it like 1 month or then 2 months, whatever, how much time you have. And then you can kind of work slowly into to taking that giant step, and it doesn't feel as overwhelming as,
Mm,
normally would.
yeah. Oh, that's really good advice. Catherine, do you have anything coming up, any projects that the listeners might want to partake in to learn from your wisdom and experiences?
I don't have anything going on right now, but definitely I would suggest continue to follow me on Instagram. I have some amazing content coming up, and it's only going to get better with your support and love. So I just hope that you all follow me there.
Yes, follow Catherine. Please hit the like button. I think people like look at
Yes.
stuff, but then they just don't hit it. And I've had friends who are like, "Oh yeah, I keep forgetting." I'm like, it's very small. You just tap, but it
Hit
makes
the like
such a
and
big
comment.
difference.
I would say like comment, take the time to even like say a few words, because it's like someone is really putting themselves out there.
Mhm.
Um, and for many people, this is like their second job, or even like their third job, or their side hustle, or their main job. And take that time to appreciate, like you would want to be appreciated at your work. We also like to be appreciated about our work.
Exactly, exactly. So echo that for everybody that's on doing digital content to please like. Thank you so much, Catherine, for joining us. This has been such an amazing, encouraging conversation. If you're listening and you want to get the links to this show, just go over to our website, Being Brown and Bold at WordPress, and you can find all the links there. And we are going to be back with another exciting episode coming soon. But until then, be wise and be bold.
Bye.